Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Matte. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. What a crazy week. Campus crackdowns across the country. The Biden administration locking arms with Republicans to smear students protesting genocide in Gaza as anti-Semitic and justifying violence against them. Because why not? Why not? We're committing unspeakable violence against Palestinians in Gaza. So why not justify violence against people trying to stop their mass murder?
It's the Biden playbook. You've heard of the Russian playbook, the RPB? Well, there's a Biden playbook, BPB. And that is when you smear anti-genocide protests as anti-Semitism.
And someone who's very familiar with being smeared is this week's guest, Jill Stein, who's running for president for the Green Party. And along with her campaign manager, Jason Call, they were assaulted at a recent campus protest against genocide in Gaza. And we're going to speak to them about that and a whole lot more in this week's interview. Let's go to our four basic food groups. What do we have for Democrat Suck?
So for Democrat Suck, we have a great statement from President Biden's Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates. This is what Biden had to say about the nonviolent student protests and student encampments that are being held. Again, they're nonviolent. The only violence we've seen has come from the police. And here is the statement. President Biden has stood against repugnant anti-Semitic smears and violent rhetoric his entire life. He condemns the use of the term intifada, as he has the other tragic and dangerous hate speech displayed in recent days. President Biden respects the right to free expression, but protests must be peaceful and lawful. Forcibly taking over buildings is not peaceful. It is wrong, and hate speech and hate symbols have no place in America. So thank you, Biden, for telling people what they can and cannot say, for saying the word intifada, which literally means shaking off and is used to mean uprising, that's hate speech. It's interesting how the media and our political elites have focused on cries for Palestinian liberation, cries for Palestinian equal rights, cries against genocide. They consider that hate speech, but they're okay with the actual genocide that's being conducted by Israel, and they're okay with the actual hate speech we've seen from the counter-protesters. We've seen a lot of hate speech coming from pro-Israel people, and the media seems to be ignoring that, and violence as well, right? Yeah, and we'll get into that later. But that is one piece of my Democrat suck, because that is such a reprehensible statement from Biden. Again, this is such an obvious talking point to try to delegitimize these student protests, these student encampments, all of which have significant Jewish presence there. But again, they have to pretend that this is anti-Semitic because there's no way to defend what they're doing in supporting Israel. And let's hear what White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre had to say about these encampments and protests.
A couple of things. The president is being kept regularly updated on what's happening. As you just stated, across the country, he is monitoring the situation closely. So is his team. And I would just add that no president has spoken more forcefully about combating anti-Semitism than this president. Let's not forget, in 2017, he was very clear what we saw, the anti-Semitic vile that we saw in Charlottesville, on the streets of Charlottesville. He called that out. And one of the reasons he stepped into the 2020 election is because of what he saw, is because he wanted to speak out and speak against what we were seeing in this country at that time. Democracy was under attack. Our freedoms were under attack, and we're still fighting for that.
That's such a funny talking point. So you have a career politician, Joe Biden, who's ran for president multiple times. He's always aspired power. He was vice president, after all, under Obama, after he failed to run for president in that same primary against Obama. And now all of a sudden they want us to believe that, him running for president again in 2020 wasn't a part of his career ambitions to be powerful. It's because he saw some racism at a protest 3 years earlier. It was he's like, I got to get in the ring.
Right.
I got to get in the ring. Yeah, this is so funny. It's if you've been chasing power your entire life, literally, you can't expect us to believe that all of a sudden your chase for power yet one more time was motivated by anything differently.
Right, exactly, yeah. Let's go back to the clip to do her full justice.
But he hasn't just done that by speaking. As you heard from my topper, he's taken action. He's taken action by moving forward with the first ever U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. More than 100 new actions were introduced, obviously, in that strategy. And that is how seriously this president takes it. And I think what's important here is that he's taken action on this issue.
So there she is comparing nonviolent student protests, which include many Jewish protesters, to the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville who chanted "Jews will not replace us" and killed a woman named Heather Heyer. Those, for her, are comparable examples of anti-Semitism.
And then she touts the so-called strategy they've had to combat anti-Semitism in more than 100 elements. What elements are there beyond just accusing people who support Palestinian livelihood as anti-Semites? Like, what other actions are they taking to combat anti-Semitism?
Right.
That seems to be the only thing that they're doing. It's anybody who protests against mass murder in Gaza, Israel's mass murder came in Gaza, they get called an anti-Semite by the White House.
Yeah, their strategy is to perpetuate anti-Semitism by suggesting that Judaism and Jewishness are intrinsically linked to Zionism, and that, of course, is the dual loyalty trope. It's really fascinating.
Which Joe Biden said multiple times. He said Jews wouldn't be safe if not for Israel.
Right. Yep.
Which is profoundly anti-Semitic. It suggests that our identity and our rights as people are somehow tied to the existence of an ethno-state.
And Thursday, Congress voted on H.R. 690, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which, to quote Jewish Voice for Peace, weaponizes charges of anti-Semitism against people who are using their voices to advocate for Palestine and legitimate criticism of Israel, which is currently committing genocide in Gaza. The bill will effectively end free speech on college campuses. And this Anti-Semitism Awareness Act was not surprisingly championed by the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, and it'll change what constitutes anti-Semitic harassment by incorporating the definition of anti-Semitism by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance into Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Pretty scary.
There's a common refrain going on right now that it's a hard time to be Jewish. And it's correct. It's a hard time to be Jewish because these monsters are weaponizing Jewish identity to justify mass murder and to demonize anybody who criticizes it. It's, for me, it's humiliating, and it's so insane. And people, so many, unfortunately, fellow Jews are acting like complete ghouls and cheapening the history of anti-Semitism in the most malicious way. It's every day gets more embarrassing for me to witness.
Well, I mean, I'm so grateful to organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now, because it's so important politically, morally, ethically, and also for my own self-interest. It's important for the world to see that there are Jews who reject Zionism, despite the claims of Israel.
Well, sorry, Katie. According to Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the so-called Anti-Defamation League, if you're celebrating Jewish Voice for Peace, you're really celebrating a proxy of Iran.
Oh, that is true.
That's literally what he said. In fact, let's watch the tape.
About time that the presidents and these campus administrators across the country started again simply saying, you got to play by the rules. I mean, talk about the height of entitlement, right? Thinking that you can just act with impunity wherever you want. It's funny. We're talking about Iran a few minutes ago. Iran has their military proxies like Hezbollah, and Iran has their campus proxies like these groups like SJP and JVP. Look at them. This is literally like a demonstration in Tehran, and you can't believe it's happening in Morningside Heights. So, as you know, President Shafiq testified before Congress on Wednesday.
Talk about entitlement. This whiny loser has the gall and the entitlement to go on national TV, smear a activist group of Jewish people who oppose the occupation, oppose genocide, as being a proxy of Iran, and demand that everybody, all these campus groups, get censored and arrested. That's entitlement to the extreme. And amazingly, his group is cited still as some sort of expert on anti-Semitism. So they put together this list of all these anti-Semitic incidents, and basically their definition of what that means is basically someone saying "Free Palestine," anti-Semitic. Right.
Well, he is an expert in anti-Semitism because he perpetuates it every single day, that he pretends that being Jewish means being Zionist.
Man, oh man.
So give him some credit, Aaron. Credit where credit's due.
All right. Well, let's check in on the Republican side to see if things are any better. Spoiler alert, they're not. The Republican response to all this is to basically somehow pretend that Joe Biden is sympathetic to Hamas. That's literally the Republican talking point. And they especially want to go after Democrats who dared criticize the Israeli genocide. So here, for example, is House Majority Whip Tom Emmer.
House Republican Conference is here today to deliver a message to the pro-terrorist anti-Semites taking over our college campuses. We're here to deliver a message to the university administrators who have chosen to be complicit in these movements for hate rather than taking action. And we're here to deliver a message to Hamas, Iran, and members of the squad, including my Minnesota colleague Ilhan Omar, who have all endorsed these anti-Semitic protests that enough is enough. Accountability is here. Our college campuses should never be breeding grounds for anti-Semitism.
Standing next to him is House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's an evangelical, and evangelicals are notoriously endorsers of views that could be considered anti-Semitic. For example, the belief in the rapture and the belief that, basically things are going to turn around, things are going to get better when a bunch of Jews in Israel are slaughtered, and then Christ will return.
Right. We got to go back there. About 400 of us will be allowed to survive. All the other ones are going to be killed and burned for all eternity. That's his Jewish allyship. Thanks, bro.
Here's one more ally, Republican Senator and UCLA Idiot's fan favorite, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana.
All he would have to do is pick up the phone and call the president.
By the way, I've never seen Tom Cotton smile in my life. He must be a major Kennedy fan. Look at that grin.
Columbia University quietly and say, Madam President, how you doing? Listen, I don't have a lot of time and I know you're busy. You've got 14 days to get control of your campus or you're not getting any more federal money. Now, she will pounce on that like a ninja. But Joe Biden hadn't done that. And President Biden is not going to do that. And it's not just because even older people can suck. He's not going to do that because of the raw gut politics, and you know it, and I know it. President Biden is scared to death to alienate the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party.
So they love this talking where there's a pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party because there are people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib who oppose the genocide. So that makes them pro-Hamas. And that's the opposition. You'd think maybe in a healthy democracy, there'd be some organized political force in Congress who could stand up to a president abetting mass murder. But the Republican response is basically to accuse Biden of somehow being complicit with Hamas and in league with them. And it's just, the whole thing is just, it's so stupid. It's just so dumb.
So these people are part of the Likud wing of the Republican Party. Not that they'd actually object to that because they are totally in lockstep with Likud.
Yeah, but so are Democrats too. I mean, Biden's in the Likud wing too. But
we're all Likudniks now.
But they all pretend as if there's some difference between them, but they're all exactly the same. And it's a great way to fool people when you're in a democracy, is pretend as if you're actually on opposing sides when really they all have the same policy.
Right. And I think people are seeing through this. I mean, the way that there's the crackdown on nonviolent students is something that I think people thought Biden would prevent or would not happen under Biden. Okay. Some people thought it wouldn't happen under Biden. I think a lot of us thought it would. But I think this is yet another example of how the difference between Republicans and Democrats is negligible. So anyway, let's move on to Isn't That Weird? For Isn't That Weird, let's take a look at a woman who was the victim of a horrible anti-Semitic hate crime. As we'll see, this is a woman who called the police on her attackers.
Yes, they're right in front of me right now. They're really fighting. This person is not in I need genocide. I need help.
So here she is, Danielle Shalfie. She's a Chicago public school teacher, and she's falsely calling cops on people who are protesting genocide. And she says, I need help. I know that because it's hard to hear. She says, I need help.
Oh, they're surrounding me. They won't let me move. No.
They're all just surrounding me. They won't let me move. And you see her right here. She's free to move. And the people around her are saying she can go wherever she wants.
You are free to move. You are free to move. She is free to move. You are free to move. She's free to move. She's free to leave. She is free to leave. No one is surrounding her. She is free to leave.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1.
And she's counting how many people are surrounding her and letting her leave. They're not surrounding her, actually.
They're surrounding me. I can take a
She's free to leave. No one is surrounding her.
I need help. No one is surrounding her.
No one is surrounding her.
I'm just walking my dog. I need help.
She's free to leave.
I'm a Jewish American. I need help.
I'm a Jewish American. I need help. She does need help. She needs help because she's calling the cops on a non-existent crime. Like, she's standing there, for audio people only. She's standing there, not surrounded. She can go wherever she wants. And she is calling the police and acting like she's under attack. And it reminds me a lot of that woman who, remember that woman who called the cops on someone in Central Park who was not committing a crime?
Yes, the bird watching man, a black man who was out there like watching birds, and she tried to call the cops. She did call the cops on him.
She did call the cops on him, yeah.
Yeah, and she was rightfully mocked for that. I think she even lost her job. But
yeah,
the impunity that Israel supporters have, they don't get the same treatment. And as an example of that, for Isn't That Terrible? So we just saw an example of a Israel supporter trying to start some, like, trying to pretend as if she was under threat when she wasn't. Here are Israel supporters at UCLA viciously attacking people, and police and campus security are nowhere to be found. So in this video, you have Israel supporters chanting and calling for a second Nakba against Palestinians while also being violent against them.
And the Nakba, of course, is the expulsion, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in 1948.
You're gonna block Jewish kids? Yeah, we fighting back, bitch! Yeah, you terrorists! We can drop it out, station!
So I've been to that encampment at UCLA. It's very peaceful. These are a bunch of young people who, have set up there's a food station where people are donating food, and people are engaging in discussions and lectures, and people have come to speak there. It was really pleasant. And they were attacked by this mob of hooligans who also, and let's watch this video, launched fireworks directly into the encampment.
Free Palestine! Watch out!
I mean, imagine how scary that is. You're sleeping in a tent for days to protest the genocide, and there's no one there to protect you. So these mobs of Israel supporters go there, they assault you. They've done all sorts of terrible things. Someone threw a backpack with mice to try to set off mice inside the encampment. There were people there with banana allergies, so people brought bananas to try to cause an allergic reaction. And then they attacked them directly with fireworks. And as we can see from these videos, there's no campus security. There was no police whatsoever. Basically, the police and security, I think, let this happen. They did not step in for a very, very, very long time. It's extremely dangerous. And it's horrible. Completely normalized. But yet, what is the discourse we get in public, from all these cable networks and politicians? It's that Jewish students don't feel safe. Right. Jewish students don't feel safe. And of course, they're referring to a specific type of Jewish student, a Jewish student who supports genocide.
Right. Not the anti-Zionist Jewish ones don't feel safe.
Yeah, exactly.
They're at a protest, yeah.
And they're being attacked. But so we have not just a normalization of a crackdown of free speech, but a normalization of violence against these protesters. And that's where we're at.
And yet the media is totally silent about it. But also, I think it's worth playing this banana clip just to show how sadistic these people are. Because as you just mentioned, there was an allergy, a banana allergy, right, at an encampment in UCLA. And let's just see how these pro-Zionist protesters reacted to that.
That place Why don't you guys fucking help your fucking people?
There's a woman eating a banana, dancing with the banana, and draped in an Israeli flag, just showing off her contempt.
There's so many more clips we can show. There's one clip of a woman yelling at the UCLA protesters, women protesters, that she hopes they get raped.
Yeah, that's a classic. These people bring that one out a lot.
They love to wish rape upon opponents of
people.
genocide. They
Yeah.
love to do that. And she calls women a prostitute, using a slang word in Arabic for that.
Sharmuta.
Yeah, so it's just the behavior. And then so on top of that, then you had turn on TV and everyone's talking about the safety of Jewish students. Jewish students don't feel safe. Comparing the peaceful protesters to Nazis. It's truly, I mean, this is at least in my lifetime, I can't recall something as crazy as this.
Yeah, really, truly.
And it's all on behalf of a foreign state. It's like, if these kids were protesting what the U.S. is doing, I don't think the vitriol on TV and from politicians would be as extreme. It's because it's Israel.
Right.
And Israel it's so important for the bipartisan establishment. It protected at all costs, and things are tolerated that I don't even think would be tolerated if these kids were protesting the U.S. government.
I think we're at a historic moment. We're also coming up on May 4th, which is the anniversary of Kent State, where 9 students were shot, 4 students were killed protesting the Vietnam War. And, we've seen snipers. We've literally seen snipers on the top of buildings at Indiana University. And we've seen police, obviously, with guns drawn, enter into Columbia University buildings. So I really wouldn't be surprised. I hope I'm wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see someone killed.
Certainly the way things have been going, the authorities have been encouraging violence everywhere. Anything bad that happens to these students, to these protesters, it starts at the top. It starts with President Biden, who is demonizing them as anti-Semites. It starts with him and many others in the political media establishment.
Yeah. And make sure you do check out our Thursday Throwdown, guys, because we go through a lot of the clips of the media malpractice in inciting hatred and violence against these peaceful protesters. We are so excited to be bringing to you an interview with Dr. Jill Stein, who is, of course, running for president. She's the Green Party candidate for president. We are talking to Dr. Jill Stein as well as to Jason Call, her campaign manager. He himself is running for Congress in Washington's 2nd Congressional District. And they were both recently arrested at a protest at Washington University in St. Louis. So here is Jill and Jason. Thank you so much for joining Dr. Jill Stein and Jason Call.
Great to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
So I thought we'd start off by talking about your recent arrest. Let's take a look at the footage of you getting roughed up. Anything you want to tell us before we watch this clip of you getting roughed up with weapons, including a bicycle?
I think it speaks for itself. So.
Okay. And this was at Washington University at a protest for Palestine.
Yes.
I think the thing that I would say prior to this is that there were attempts at de-escalation. We did try and engage with the university administration, along with a couple of the aldermen from the Board of Aldermen in St. Louis. Really tried to engage with university administration, and they completely rejected any dialogue.
Disturbing, but not shocking. Okay, so let's take a look.
Hold the line now! Hold the line! Hold the line now! Hold the line! Hold it down for Palestine! Hold the line now! Hold the line! Hold the line now! Hold the line! Hold it down for Palestine! Hold it down for Palestine! Hold the line now! Hold the line! Hold the line now! Hold the line! Hold the line! Get back! Hey, you get back! You get back! What are you doing? Fascist fucks! Fascist fucks! Fascist fucks! You get back!
Tell us about that experience. Were you expecting that? Was that something you had anticipated?
No, not at all. We had been at a campaign event at the public library, which was a couple blocks away from the university, and there were some wonderful, eloquent students who were there. And afterwards, on our way out, another student invited us to please come and just show support for the students, which of course, we wanted to show in every way possible. When we got there, we were asked by the students, as Jason mentioned, to please try to help de-escalate, to speak with the administrators. And that was along with the two aldermen or alderwomen, I guess you would say, from St. Louis. Seemed like maybe they cooled their jets for an hour or two, but then they assembled again. A lot of police. I don't know how many bicycles there were, but there were some, and they definitely lined up. And with one of the bikes coming straight for us, and I had on either side Jason and our deputy campaign manager Kelly, and by the way, we were in line because the students asked us to please stand with them. And we were hopeful that, by being there, we could help sort of cool things, knowing that there would be a presidential campaign platform kind of live streaming this to the world, which was part of our effort to de-escalate the thing, that the eyes of the world are upon you. We were hopeful that that would sort of cool things. So we saw them coming, and it was like there wasn't even time to get scared. We didn't think something was going to happen. We didn't expect that we were going to be arrested that day. In fact, we had another campaign event to be at, but we felt like we could not say no to the students who were really putting everything on the line. And when they began to assault us with this bicycle, I'm not sure if it was the handlebars that began ramming me in the chest or if it was the bike pedal, but it was, and then they were grabbing us as well. And I'll let Jason describe it from his perspective, because I was mostly obsessed with the bicycle and how to keep from being crushed by the bicycle and how to keep from falling over. In fact, every time I watch that video clip, I feel like I'm being pushed over and about to lose my balance. And it just felt really precarious. I don't know if you can see it in the film, but at one point, the cop who's right opposite of me, he bends down. What he's doing there is grabbing my right leg at the foot and jerking my leg up in order to deliver the knockout blow and to send me, hurling backwards on my head. And I was miraculously able to just I had a reflex to shake my foot loose and to shake my leg loose as he was trying to catapult me backwards, a backflip onto my head, basically. And I was able to get out of that death grip. And at that point, he said to me, "You've just assaulted a police officer," which turned out to be, well, it's unclear exactly what the charges are, but that became clear in our processing too. Go ahead, Jason, why don't you comment?
Yeah, I was going to say there's no doubt in my mind that Jill specifically was targeted because they were looking and pointing and saying she's under arrest. It was almost as if they're saying, get her out of here first. And so you can see, watching the video, you can see they've got their bikes raised. I mean, they've got the frame of the bike where the seat and the handlebars are almost at throat level for Jill, pushing her backwards. And you can see a tall county police officer, taller than me, with a beard on, and you can see him reach over. When you see him reach over, he's got Jill's wrist in his hand. I had to hit him on the arm and say, "Let go of her, you're going to break her fucking arm." And I had to say that 3 times to him, and he finally let go. And you can see him point at her, and that's when he says to her, she's under arrest. And so she had the other guy who was pulling at her leg on one side, and that she just described, trying to pull her leg out from under her. I was on the other side of that, so I didn't see that thing go down. What I saw was this big, tall guy reaching over the top of the bike, and he was literally trying to pull Jill over the top of the bike while they were pushing the bike into her. And when he finally released, he pointed at her and he said, she's under arrest. So there's no doubt in my mind that they were going after Jill. They knew we were here. We had tried to engage with them directly beforehand with the alderwomen. And the president, Megan Green, the president of the board of St. Louis aldermen, was there with us trying to de-escalate. And I think that they wanted to get Jill out of there. Jill and I were among the very first people taken to the ground, walked out of there, and put in the back of the wagons.
And if I can also point out, there was another person who was targeted because he was recording the event. This is Stephen Tamari, he's hospitalized now. And
Yeah.
if you've seen the footage of him, it's absolutely shocking. I mean, it's amazing that he's alive because, not only did they, first he was just taking photographs. He wasn't even part of the, of the encampment, really. He wasn't in the circle. He was just photographing it. And you can see on the video, a cop points to him and then several cops mob him and take him down. It's completely unprovoked. It's just because he's photographing. They mob him, they take him down, they very brutally manhandle him and cuff him. And then he appears to be lifeless when they drag him away from the crowd. And what you see is once he's away from the crowd, one of the cops jumps on his stomach with his knee and puts his full weight. By the appearance in the video, it's as if that whole weight of this large man is stomping down at the level of his knee. His knee is landing in the abdomen of this professor, this 65-year-old professor, and then he's dragged off to the paddy wagon. And it is just shocking and horrifying that these are the police forces with a reputation for these kinds of offenses and convictions, actually, for this kind of utter brutalization for just what appears to be the sheer pleasure, where they are exchanging emails in advance of busting protests about how much they're looking forward to brutalizing people. These are the police forces that the university saw fit to call in to discipline students. It's such a horrifying reflection of what's going on in our universities. And these are the universities that are contracting with the war profiteers to send weapons of death and destruction to Gaza.
We actually have that clip. And this is at the same, so people are clear, this is the same campus where you were assaulted and arrested.
We didn't see this at the time, but I met up with him because we then were separately processed. After we all went through the processing at the county jail, he and I got diverted. He was the only other person I saw in there that were being fingerprinted and mugshot and, done like as if we were going to have an intake. And it seemed as though we were going to be booked for the jail and we were going to be there for I don't know how long. And he and I talked at that point, and he had no idea why he was assaulted. And I'm just amazed after what he went through that he was able to walk around and talk. But apparently, I don't know what shape he's in right now, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he had some serious internal injuries.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one more thing also, is when it took about 4 or 5 cops to bring me down, and they had a knee in my back. I was terrified. When you have a cop kneeling on your back and you literally cannot get a breath because you got a lot of adrenaline going through you. When they finally got me up, because they did let me up, I had to, as much as I could yell at them, I can't breathe. And I knew those were the words to say to have them, but I literally could not breathe for, it was probably not more than 15 or 20 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. When you can't get a breath and you're in that situation. And I thought to myself, my God, George Floyd went through this for 9 minutes. It was absolutely terrifying being in that situation and not being able to get a breath.
And by the way, these techniques of policing, are being systematically taught to police forces all over the country through these programs that bring the Israeli occupation forces together with our police forces, the FBI, ICE, et cetera, to, train them all in techniques developed suppressing, and crushing Palestinian lives.
We're going to return to that in 1 second. Let's just take a look at this footage of Professor Tamari getting assaulted. He's in the orange jacket. They are pointing at him.
Don't hurt him!
repeatedly stomping on government. Just quickly, as horrible as it is to do that to someone's back, it's even more dangerous to do that, to their belly, because you're going to rupture their liver or their spleen or their gut. I mean, that is unbelievably dangerous.
Right. And Jill, of course, Dr. Jill Stein is a physician, so you obviously understand this particularly well. But apparently he reported, or his wife said that the doctor, because he was hospitalized after, and the doctor said he was lucky to be alive because his lung could have been punctured.
Exactly. His lung and a whole lot more, too.
Right. So the question is, why is the state, and then I definitely want to talk about the connection between the Israeli forces and the American police forces and military forces, but why is it so important for this government to be repressing these protests with the ferocity with which they are repressing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a big challenge to empire. As Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, said, Israel is the unsinkable battleship for the U.S. in the Middle East. And this genocide represents kind of the ultimate expression of Israel being given full support for whatever Israel wants to do. In fact, in many ways, President Biden has handed over the baton. He's passed over the baton of being commander-in-chief, even of our country, to Bibi Netanyahu, who kind of has the authority to go ahead and start a war with Iran if he wants. No prior consultation required. And, U.S. support and funding and diplomatic cover is going to be there. So, this is what empire looks like. And it's a huge challenge to U.S. empire fundamentally for people to be calling this out and demanding that genocide end, and that the whole relationship of Israel and the U.S. as partners in this genocide that is empowering Israel to kind of carry on the abuse that it does. So this is a very big challenge. And unfortunately, the universities are then also embroiled in this because their funding is coming both from billionaires, and Zionist donors, as well as from the war contractors. So again, it's like a reflection of the militarization of our economy too, which is why the colleges largely don't want to challenge this.
To add to that, sort of war machine writ large here. And Katie, I'm running for Congress in Washington's 2nd District, where Boeing is the largest employer in my district. And the guy that I'm running against, a quote unquote good Democrat, takes, most of his funding from the war machine and the fossil fuel industry. Those students were there. They had one demand. They wanted Washington University to divest from Boeing. About 30 miles outside of St. Louis, Boeing manufactures munitions that have been proven to be used in the atrocities and the genocide in Gaza. And they did not want their tuition money and their association to be with the university's association to be with the war machine. So, beyond the association with Israel, and it is this sort of war machine writ large here, that the students are asking, we don't want to have this association for our education and our future. I think that there is, just widely, why are our educational institutions so partnered with these military contractors?
So, Jill, you're running for president. I want to ask you about the response of our political leadership. We've just had this crackdown at several campuses, City College of New York, Columbia University, hundreds arrested there. And then you had at UCLA a violent attack on the Gaza Solidarity encampment, fireworks being launched at the encampment, people being beaten, and campus security and police were nowhere to be found. A really dangerous situation. And what happened right before all this? You had President Biden coming out with a statement accusing these college students of anti-Semitism. You also had Republican politicians basically calling these young students Nazis. Here, for example, is House Speaker Mike Johnson.
desperate times call for desperate measures. I think when you're calling for the extermination of a race of people, which is exactly what many in the crowd are calling for. The reason Hamas endorsed the protest at Columbia University is because they were using Hamas talking points. They're talking when they chant from the river to the sea. You understand they're talking about the elimination of the state of Israel. They were putting posters onto placards and telephone poles and trees around campus that is actual imagery that the Nazis used in the 1930s. Literally the same symbols and messages they're putting up. This is not the free expression of ideas. This is not the use of the free marketplace of ideas for debate that would be healthy on a university campus that's envisioned for a place of higher education. It is the opposite. This is threatening, violent, inciting speech, and it's dangerous.
And by the way, in addition to Mike Johnson, 21 Democrats signed a letter to Columbia telling the Board of Trustees to act decisively to end the encampment or resign.
And calling the encampment anti-Jewish.
Right. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So it's a totally bipartisan vilification. Yeah.
We have been to a number of these protests now, and by invitation, we were at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, and there were signs saying, anti-Semitism is not acceptable here. The people at these protests have been, kind and loving and, welcoming, and to call, I have not seen any anti-Semitism. There's anti-Zionism. There's anti-occupation, there's anti-imperialism, but there's been no anti-Semitism. In fact, counter anti-Semitism speech has been prevalent there.
And in the same way that, Columbia University was celebrating the Seder with this kind of, multi-religious celebration, that is the feeling here. These are peaceful, respectful gatherings. What's not welcome there is Zionism. What's not welcome is the intent to ethnically cleanse and to genocide Palestinians. That's not welcome there. It's true. But that has nothing to do with Judaism. And you get the sense that there's this full court press now to try to double down and really silence this movement because public opinion is seeing this, this genocide unfolding in real time, live streamed onto our cell phones with us really 24/7. This is this is empire kind of striking back, trying to quickly shut it down and change the subject because it's far too powerful. And this movement against it on campuses has really taken off like a wildfire. But this is the opposite of anti-Semitism. And as a Jew, I can say that I'm welcomed as a Jew and more appreciated for being a Jew. And that to say that protesting genocide is anti-Semitic is to imply that Jews are just fine with genocide. And to my mind, that is the most anti-Semitic thing one can possibly say. And, it's just preposterous. And these are kind of the desperate talking points of an empire that's very insecure. And what that clip didn't show, and maybe it was in a different communication, but Mike Johnson is also calling for, denying funding to any school that allows these, so-called pro-Hamas gatherings to take place. It is such a mischaracterization, purposeful. It's such deception to call this pro-Hamas. This is not pro-Hamas. This is fundamentally anti-genocide. And that's what the driver is here.
And imagine if what was happening in America was happening in any of the countries that we have defined as the enemy, Russia or China. If these things were going on anywhere else in the world, they would be screaming to high heaven about it and how repressive these countries are, and probably using it as another excuse to go to war with them.
Right. And of course, it's also anti-Semitic to suggest that all Jews support genocide, and anti-Semitic to suggest that all Jews are blind supporters of Israel. That's the whole dual loyalty trope, one of the anti-Semitic classics. And yet all these people who are conflating being Jewish with being Zionist are happy to do so. In fact, Jill, you kind of made history perhaps by distinguishing between Judaism and Zionism on CNN. Let's take a look.
Zionism is different from Judaism, and it is entirely wrong to conflate the two. being against Zionism, which I regard as essentially a matter of ethnic cleansing and land theft. Essentially, that is the purpose of Zionism, to take land that belonged to other people. Yes, Jews have been horribly traumatized and victimized, but that doesn't then allow one group to take land and displace another group. To look at the actions of the Israeli government, they are attempting to drive the occupants out of this land altogether. And that has been very much the policy of Israel well before it was a state. Since the Zionist movement began, Jews who lived together with Muslims and Christians in Palestine for centuries. And it was a peaceful place. It was only with the advent of the Zionists, who felt like this land belonged to them, that the violence came. And many Jews left, as well as Christians and Palestinians, with the entry of the Zionists. This is a very difficult topic for people of Jewish background to come to terms with. And I see this as someone who grew up in the 60s. I see this as remarkably similar to the very difficult wake up of the white community with the civil rights movement in the 1960s. This was a difficult conversation that involved confronting the many institutions of white supremacy and the very challenging conditions of racism that were endemic, in our schools, in housing, and so on. It's a hard conversation, but it has to be had, and it cannot be shut down. I think it's really important to have it, especially because our tax dollars are funding this war, which the American people vehemently protest.
I hear varying different viewpoints on the complexity of this issue and personal opinions to that regard, and I do wonder if politics considers each and every aspect of it. My suspicions is that it does not, but this conversation has been very thought-provoking for me today. Thank you for joining us.
I was surprised that they even let you say that they didn't cut you off.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that she said something kind of validating.
Yeah, at the end, yeah. I wonder if she's going to get fired now.
Yeah, exactly. That was my fear after talking with her. But I do think that it is a very powerful analogy for people, because the current understanding of Zionism, as I understand it, kind of was made possible by these declassification of a lot of historic documents that only took place in the 1990s. So, older Jews were raised with this concept, this mythology of the good Israel, a land without a people and a people without a land. It was a match made in heaven. I don't know if you remember the songs from the time, but, I was raised on all these, Israeli folk songs, and also like the pop musicals. This is the land of milk and honey. The land of sun and song. There's this idealization of life on the kibbutz and what a wonderful and idealistic world this is, in Israel. But in fact, there's this horrific history, which is outlined very clearly in these historic documents, that there was purposeful ethnic cleansing that was going on, and essentially a terror campaign in order to make that happen. So once the actual history is recognized, it's very hard to go back. You can't unsee it, but it's really hard to have that conversation. And it makes you want to have some adult in the room, that can sit us down and say, hey folks, I'm really sorry, but it's different from what you've been taught. And here are the actual historic documents that in fact validate what the Palestinians have been saying for decades now. Right. So we need to go back to the drawing boards. And, right now we have a one-state problem. We need to transition from a one-state problem to a one-state solution where everyone, has equal rights and justice before the law and all that, and security, right. and the right to peace and security.
And that was referred to in the archives. They talk about ethnic cleansing as transfer. That's the term that they use for it. But that's, of course, what was ethnic cleansing. And as you just pointed out, Palestinians were talking about this for decades, and then the new historians of Israel then went and found corroborating documents. Some of whom were not sympathetic to Palestinians, like Benny Morris, but he just had to show what was there. And it was undeniable, but that they want to transfer people, Palestinians.
Very interesting. No. Yes, absolutely.
And can you talk about the connection that you referred to earlier between Israeli forces and U.S. forces in terms of training, police and military training?
So there are these state programs, these exchange programs, like in Georgia, it's called the GILLI program, the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program, where Israel comes and teaches police officers and police departments how to use these strategies and techniques that have been developed basically, asserting the apartheid state and occupation against Palestinians. And when you combine that with the 1033 program, which is transferring surplus military equipment to the town and city level, you have towns that are equipped with all this high-powered riot gear and tanks and armored vehicles, and it's just created a whole new concept of policing. And it's not as though policing has ever been benign and nonviolent, certainly not in the African American communities. To look at the student demonstrations in Columbia in 1968, they were extremely violent, sent 150 people to the hospital, as well as, arresting 700 people, and then, the 1,000 people that cops kill every year, and those numbers keep growing. So it's not like policing has ever been kinder, gentler, thing, but it seems, I've never witnessed policing like what we saw there, and the incredible dehumanization that's really just been kicked up orders of magnitude, and it's just a very systematic, brutal takedown of people and all these techniques to put people into stress positions, carry them in stress positions. It's just an assault from the get-go. And we've created this monster now that's living in our communities. And it's just ironic how, here are the students trying to address this monster as it conducts genocide in Gaza. But here's, the tentacles of that monster reaching into the very community in the brutal police force being used to suppress this.
And to their credit, these students are undeterred. I spent 5 hours in a jail cell with 7 other community members, mostly students from Washington University, and including Jewish students who were, there was one student in there who was telling us, because we all got to know each other over 5 hours. And this one student who said, my parents are Zionists and, they support the state of Israel. And I have not, quote unquote, come out to them. And I told him, I said, this is a hell of a way to come out. So, the mood was good. Everybody felt like they were there for the right reasons and that we would all go back and do it all over again. So the more they use these tactics against us, the more we are going to resist until the genocide and occupation is over. And I don't think that anybody who was in that jail cell or got arrested at Washington University, the over 100 people, I think they've got it up to 107 people now, the lawyers have said, were arrested there. I don't think any of us are undeterred as to, what needs to happen in the end.
And if I can also chime in, you can't stress enough that what Brown University did really raises the bar for everyone. And it's not like, we have to crush this violently. No, you can recognize that there's a conversation that has to be had there. And just by recognizing that as a minimum, the students were okay then at Brown with, with calling off the encampment at that point and waiting for this vote and then carrying out their dialogue and their discussion in other ways. I completely recognize that we can't wait, 3 months till the fall term. So it's not like things are going to stop because we're on a death watch right now for 2 million people who don't have food or water or shelter or sanitation, 800 people to a toilet, and infectious diseases could just break out in the blink of an eye and hundreds of thousands could be wiped out, overnight, cholera, whatever. It's a complete state of emergency that we're in. So it's very hard to back off and not keep pushing. And I have so much respect for the students who've put everything on their line, everything in their lives on the line. For us, having careers or having, stepped back from careers, it's not such a big deal. We're not going to get kicked out of college. We're not going to lose our jobs, or our places to live. They're going to lose everything. And it's just so inspiring. Their courage is contagious, and the way it has spread like a wildfire all across the U.S. and all across the world, I think is, this is the great hope of the moment. It's the vision and the clear insight and undeterred, morality of a younger generation that's seeing the future, because it's not just Gaza here that's being destroyed. It's international law. It's human rights. The torture and murder of children on an industrial scale is being normalized. So this is not a world we can live in that's going to work for anybody, really. And it's just so inspiring to see students seeing this for what it is and, standing up and really putting it front and center in everything that we do.
And kind of as we've transitioned now to a building occupation at Columbia, and as a friend told me, Portland State University, students have occupied the library. So people may have their feelings. I think the media is casting this now as, okay, well, now here's evidence that now it is violent. And I want to remind people that when the Black members of the community in Greensboro sat at the lunch counter in Woolworths and refused to leave and demanded that they were served like everybody else, that was a building occupation. So this idea that building occupation is necessarily violent is absolutely untrue. And of course, the media is going to cast it that way. So some glass got broken. And as we know, the police are much more concerned about protecting property than they are people. But a building occupation is not necessarily a violent thing. It is still a statement of, we're undeterred, we're not going away.
Well, let's talk more about how these brave students are demonized. I want to go to one example from New York, because to justify this massive show of force against people, it was very obvious what was going on. There was an attempt to paint them as, radicalized, as having some sort of nefarious ties to extremism, maybe even terrorism. And this came from people like New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who gave a press conference where he said that these students are not just college students out there protesting, a foreign policy issue. They've been co-opted by outside forces. So this is what Mayor Adams said.
I saw similar indicators from the Black Lives Matters march when it was brought to my attention that there were those who came to the city to disrupt our city, and she was able, through her team, was able to conduct an investigation, and what I feared was actually materialized and actualized by those who were on the ground. And I know that there are those who are attempting to say, well, the majority of people may have been students. You don't have to be the majority to influence and co-op an operation. That is what this is about. And so if we want to play the word police, you could do so. I want to play the New York City police, where we're going to protect our city from those who are attempting to do what is happening globally. There is a movement to radicalize young people, and I'm not going to wait until it's done and all of a sudden acknowledge the existence of it. This is a global problem that young people are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children. And I'm not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of the city of New York. So the men and women of the New York City Police Department, you should be proud of yourself.
And Mayor Adams also made a reference to having some sort of intelligence on a presence of extremists at these rallies. And then we saw one example of what they tried to show as evidence for this. And it was the fact that the wife of Sami al-Arian visited the Columbia encampment. And for those who don't know, Sami al-Arian is a college professor in Florida who was indicted under the Patriot Act in a completely bogus case because he helped raise money for Palestinian charities. This is over a decade ago. And the jury that prosecuted him failed to return a single guilty indictment against him. They acquitted him on multiple charges. They deadlocked on others. Rather than accept their defeat, prosecutors immediately tried to bring the case again. And so Sami al-Arian, faced with this, another lengthy trial and potentially more prison time and a horrible ordeal for his family, he accepted a plea deal where basically he agreed to, a short prison sentence and then deportation. And then once he did that, then prosecutors said, all right, we need you to testify in this grand jury case. And if you don't, we're going to sentence you to more prison. And the grand jury case was totally unrelated. So basically, through other means, through really, deceptive means, they extended his prison sentence, even though he was never convicted of anything by a jury. And so his wife apparently visited the Columbia campus in solidarity. And then this became the new talking point from sources in the mayor's office. So here, for example, is CNN laundering this.
And we're learning tonight that the wife of an indicted terrorist was on the campus last week. A source pointed to a post on X by Sami Al-Arian, a former University of Southern Florida professor who pleaded guilty to a charge of conspiring to provide services to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in 2006. He posted on X last week showing a photo of his wife on the campus of Columbia University, saying, quote, "My wife Nala in solidarity with the brave and very determined Columbia University students."
And soon they kept showing this on their Chiron. I was watching this live. So basically, they're using the presence of a woman who was married to someone who was never convicted by a jury to suggest there's some sort of tie here to wrongdoing. It's him tweeting out a photo of his wife in hijab. She's 63 years old, visiting the campus. And note how CNN calls him an indicted terrorist, which is such a deceptive term. Yes, he was indicted, but a jury failed to convict him. And the only reason he spent all this time in prison is because prosecutors were so humiliated that they couldn't convict him. And so they used every means that they could. And then this was also leaked to a reporter from CBS New York. And this is what she posted on Twitter. Look at this. Breaking: New York City Hall sources tell CBS New York evidence that the wife of a known terrorist is with protesters on Columbia University campus. Now, this tweet was deleted. But the fact that this reporter was given this, it shows this was a deliberate effort to, make something out of absolutely nothing. And then finally, Sami Al-Arian's daughters, or one of his daughters, Lama Al-Arian, who's a journalist, she tweeted this about her mother's presence on campus. She says, "This is so disgusting and racist. They're talking about my 63-year-old mother who lost over 200 members of her family in Gaza. She visited the encampment for 20 minutes and ate some hummus." So look at what they tried to make out of this completely innocuous visit from a 63-year-old woman who's already gone through so much in this mass murder campaign.
Well, Jill is no stranger to this guilt by association smear. We've been fighting this through on the campaign with, that one photo of sitting at a table with Russia, and this is absolutely what they do. And I think what Jill said we were in Columbia, Missouri, speaking to community members there, and Jill called out the media. She says, the media is supposed to be a watchdog. What we have is a lapdog.
It's also interesting because just going back to that CBS journalist who tweeted that out. She also tweeted the following footage of a bus carrying protesters. And she tweeted, "Crowd cheers on the NYPD bus filled with Columbia protesters leaving campus," which of course makes it sound like they were cheering on the NYPD. Mm-hmm. And then if you scroll down, she then clarifies, "To clarify, crowds are cheering for the protesters in custody in the NYPD bus." But she left up that tweet. And it's just another example of this person who's obviously acting as a stenographer for the NYPD. And it's incredibly irresponsible and dangerous. The tweet that she deleted, it's so dangerous because it's so inciting. And it primes the police to use violence against terrorists. And it also primes Americans to be okay with it. I mean, because they think that the police are defending America from terrorists.
It's hard to not see a coordinating hand here. I mean, because the talking points seem to be so, so intensively played out now from so many sources. There's such a doubling down now going on to try to make the student protest movement scary and to, characterize it as a terrorist thing, because there is so much energy behind it. And this is definitely our experience on the campaign trail, that, the empire is losing its grip here, not only abroad by losing catastrophically war after war, destroying the image of the United States around the world, supporting a genocide which is reviled around the world, but also here at home. People no longer buy into, the parties of war on Wall Street. They're kind of done with it. And there's, not only the energy on campuses, but, at our campaign events, there's just whole new people who are coming in, not to mention that people are not showing up for the Democratic primaries. In New York, there was an 11 12% so-called uncommitted, but there was a 83% no-show relative to the 2020 primary, which was equally decided. So it's not as though, oh, that was an active primary where the vote was meaningful. No, Biden had already been coronated there too, but people showed up. They had some kind of connection with the party. Now I think people are just really disgusted with it. So this is an emergency of the economic and political elites right now, because the red flags are flying all over the place that they really are losing their stranglehold. And it's a scary moment, because it's like the bear has been cornered now, and knows that it's under attack. And where is it going to strike back next? It feels like, it will strike, and it will continue. The empire is striking back in every way that it can, because its days are numbered, and it knows that they are. So, it's a very distressing and disturbing moment, but it's important to also recognize that behind that is this kind of power of a different world that is rising up. Not that it's a perfect world, but it's a multipolar world. It's a world, without a dominating empire that can get away with genocide and destroying international law. Things are shifting. And to point out to people, for example, how much we are paying personally to maintain this endless war machine, of which genocide is kind of the ultimate expression. But according to Jeffrey Sachs, the economist at the Sustainable Development Department within the economics school at Columbia, it's $12,000 this year for the average household. That's what half of the congressional budget, which is the military budget, comes down to. It's $12,000 per household this year. It's been $50,000 since the post 9/11 wars, in pursuit of weapons of mass destruction that never existed, and which have just been creating chaos and failed states and mass refugee migrations and just global insecurity all over the place, while it's impoverishing us. So there's a story to be told here, which is empowering and which is, has a path forward. But exactly how that's going to go is hard to say right now. And now that the empire is kind of, doubling down in its kind of most insecure days, as it's kind of teetering at the brink in so many ways, as it's challenged like it's never been challenged before here at home, it's hard to say what each next battle is going to look like. It's scary because we have such a militarized police force right now. It is very scary, but there is so much momentum. Polls of young people show that about half of young people describe themselves as hopeless. About a quarter of young people say that they have attempted to harm themselves within the last 2 weeks of the poll, which kind of tells you where people are coming from. We've sort of reached the end of the line here with empire and oligarchy, and things are changing, and people are committed to that change, even though we don't exactly know what form it's going to take and how the hammer of repression and fascism is going to try to hang on to its grip. So, I know that's not a totally happy message, but there is power in this moment. And the question is, how do we continue to use that power and survive to fight another day?
Well, I want to say the happy message here is as we were released from the St. Louis County Jail, nobody left. There you get, again, over 100 people arrested, and dozens upon dozens of community members and students were there outside the St. Louis County Jail. And from the cell that I was in, you could hear every time somebody was released, a crowd cheer went up. And when I walked out, again, a crowd cheer, and people were there. How are you doing? Are you feeling okay? Do you need a ride home? Do you have a place to stay? Is everything okay? And the feeling of solidarity and community is what is going to see us through here. And so as empire gets more brutal and repressive, those of us who are looking for a better day and a better future, we're gonna build more and more solidarity to see this thing through.
What do you make of Congress just passing another $95 billion for warmongering, including $61 billion for the proxy war in Ukraine, I believe $24 billion for Israel's genocide? You had Democrats, some of them voting against the Israel component, but every single Democrat voted for the Ukraine money. Not one Democrat, including those who called for diplomacy with Russia over a year ago, voted against this funding for Ukraine in the House. In the Senate, there were a couple, and those senators made clear they were doing so because they opposed the Israel funding. But in the House, 0 Democrats who could vote against $61 more billion for the Ukraine proxy war. And the only people who voted consistently against both components, the Israel money and the Ukraine money, were Republicans, a handful of them. So, Jill, what do you make of the left ceding so much ground here when it comes to standing up to militarism?
I think it makes a mockery of this concept of the lesser evil. The lesser evil, like compared to what? The Democrats who were supposed to be the less militarized, who were supposed to be standing up for our rights of free speech and resistance to censorship, who were supposed to be defending the rights of immigrants, who've now adopted the slurs and the policies of Republicans as well along the border. The system has just made a mockery of itself, and we're really encouraging people to break up with this abusive relationship, this abusive political relationship where people make excuses for continuing to stay with their abuser, like, oh, it'll get better next year, or oh, they had to do it, or oh, they're the lesser evil. But the lesser evil thing just doesn't hold up to the light of day. Look at what's happening on our campuses. Look how people are being assaulted and beat up by police simply for asserting their constitutional rights of free speech and the right to protest. This kind of brutality is what fascism looks like. Genocide is the trademark of fascism. It's the hallmark of fascism. So we don't have to wait for Donald Trump to get to fascism. And in fact, remember, the most extremist forms of the Republican Party have been funded by Democrats, including Donald Trump himself, who got his start as the so-called Pied Piper candidate, funded by Hillary Clinton, and I should say promoted by Hillary Clinton and lifted up by the Clinton and DNC campaign. And they've continued to do that. In the midterms of 2022, it was some $50 million that was being spent to lift up the most extreme Republican candidates, with the idea that they would be easier to beat in the general election. So, the evil of both parties is so intertwined right now, it really can't be separated. And to my mind, this is the imperative for, ending this abusive political relationship, because in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. You can't hide behind a lesser evil and still make a demand. Democracy needs a moral compass. It needs a vision forward. It needs an agenda. And you don't get that by, hanging back beneath the veil of the lesser evil. And the companion quote from Alice Walker, that the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing they have it to start with. This is an incredibly powerful moment. According to Reuters, it's 68% of Americans who abhor this genocide, who want an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic resolution. 100 million Americans who are locked into medical debt, 44 million into student debt. There are going to be 3 pro-genocide, pro-war, anti-worker campaigns on the ballot: RFK, Trump, and Biden. There will be one and only one anti-war, anti-genocide, pro-worker, and pro-climate emergency campaign. That's us. There are other wonderful proponents of that agenda, but they are not. They do not have a path forward, and they're not on the ballot in significant numbers, and really do not have a way to accomplish that. We have 75% of that work done right now. So it's going to be 4 candidates, and there will be one of us, and there will be 3 of them. They could very well wind up splitting the pro-genocide vote. And if you're dividing a vote up 4 ways, it can be won with as little as 26%. We're now running 8% in Wisconsin, the most recent poll, and 22% for people 30 and under, 18% under 45 to 30. So, our numbers have only just begun to come up. People are in a perfect storm right now for just changing our political landscape. In fact, people are screaming for it and clamoring for it. So this is a tool we can continue to use, even if our campus encampments are being shut down. It's important for us to struggle and to use all those tools of struggle and not give empire and oligarchy a pass, not in any, dimension of our world, because this is a moment of power. If we seize the moment and we mobilize to actually act together in concert to achieve that power.
When it comes to ballot access for you, I remember, in previous campaigns in which you've run, there've been all sorts of shenanigans by Democrats, especially to keep you off the ballot. And you've also been arrested. This isn't, recently is not your first time in handcuffs. I remember at a debate at Hofstra University, you were arrested for trying to take part in a debate. So as we start to wrap, what sort of shenanigans are your opponents up to this time to keep you off the ballot and off the debate stage?
Well, their lead shenanigan organizer, Mark Elias, who was the lead counsel for John Kerry's campaign. And then after that, he led the charge against Ralph Nader and coordinated in a way that's probably illegal the services of multiple, legal firms across the country, so that Ralph Nader was facing something like, was it 20 simultaneous lawsuits to throw him off the ballot.
Mark Elias, by the way, was Hillary Clinton's lead attorney when they tried to frame Trump as a Russian agent, and you got thrown into that whole thing too.
Well, isn't that interesting? And he was also the lead attorney on the dirty tricks that were used against Matthew Hoh, the anti-war activist running for Senate as a Green. And I don't know if you heard about this, but it speaks volumes about their brilliant strategies. They called, that is Mark Elias's team of dirty tricksters, they called people who had signed Matthew Hoh's petition to put him on the ballot in North Carolina. They actually called them up impersonating Greens as they made the call. And they pretended to be the Green Party that was telling people to please take their name off of Matthew Hoh's petition. But in all their, genius, they happened to call the chair of the Green Party in North Carolina, who had the presence of mind to put on a recording device, and he actually recorded this conversation where they were impersonating the Green Party, calling the chair of the Green Party, telling him to take his name off the petition. So, that recently went to court, and they were found guilty. They were fined. This is what they do. They've already declared that they have an army of attorneys that they will be using to practice similar dirty tricks. They described it as, I think, highlighting the unsavory aspects of the character of the challengers, which is another way of saying, they're going to just go all out for smear campaigns. And they are, go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, what they did in New York alone was a dirty trick. Andrew Cuomo slipped in an election law into a budget bill in 2021 that tripled the amount of signatures needed. So now, rather than 15,000 signatures that we needed in 2020, they have made it 45,000 signatures. And as you know, when you are doing petitioning, you get they need 45,000 valid signatures, which means we need to get upwards of 80 or 90,000 raw signatures, and that in itself, is a manipulation of, to keep people off the ballot. So, anyone who is listening who can help us in New York with petitioning, we absolutely need your help.
Yeah, it won't take, again, we have 75% more than that of the work done. We are close to pushing through, and we really encourage people. If you're in New York State, you can help carry a petition. You can certainly help sign one. And even if you're not in New York State, if you can get to New York State, you can help carry a petition and get in touch with us at jillstein2024.com. This is the perfect storm for political uprising. In fact, it is in full swing right now. And this is the time to ride that tsunami and, push for the change that we desperately need. We need it more urgently than ever, and it's more possible than it's ever been. So this is really a very magical moment to rise up for an America and a world that works for all of us. It is within our reach if we stand up with the courage of our convictions.
That's a great place to wrap. Jill Stein, Jason Call, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it very much. Great to see you.
Very exciting to talk to Jill Stein. So refreshing to hear someone who exists outside of the corporate duopoly.
Candidate interviews can sometimes be kind of a snooze in my experience, but Jill Stein is a huge exception because she actually has principles and she is out there fighting for decency and trying to raise all these issues that are just completely buried by our, duopoly, by our bipartisan establishment. So kudos to her and everyone who is involved in her campaign. It's very hard to do what they're doing. They get attacked in so many different ways. Today we talk about how they were physically attacked at a protest, but there's also all the ways in which they're maneuverings to take her off the ballot and to silence her. So really great to talk to her and to Jason call.
Aaron, you said she's fighting for decency. I just want to correct you. We already have a decency president, as we learned from the White House Correspondents' Dinner and Colin Jost's wonderful emceeing, where he said that his grandfather voted for Biden because he's the president of decency.
I apologize to all the decent genocide supporters out there for forgetting Biden, because if there's one thing that denotes decency, it's supporting mass murder of a defenseless population. So yes, apologies.
Apology accepted on behalf of Colin Jost and President Biden. Well, thanks, guys. This has been great. Make sure you subscribe to us so you get to see our Thursday Throwdown, where we go through some truly embarrassing, humiliating, but important examples of media cheering on genocide. Sounds like a great time, right?
It's a great time. UsefulIdiotspodcast.com is the website. Go there, support the show, keep us going, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For extended episodes, bonus content, and our weekly Thursday Throwdown episode, please subscribe at UsefulIdiotspodcast.com. Support the show for free by subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review. You can also follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod. Thanks for supporting independent media. We'll see you next time.